We now present For the Record.
Welcome to For the Record. I'm Will Keneally. This week we heard the governor deliver his long-awaited budget address, as well as see voters across the state head to the polls for the spring primary. And that was only just Tuesday. Now, in a few minutes, we'll hear more on that budget request from Universities of Wisconsin President Jay Rothman. We'll also have a full budget breakdown with Wisconsin Policy Forum President Jason Stein. But we start with the election this week. The one race on the statewide ballot was the primary for State Superintendent of Public Instruction. Now, the race saw two candidates advance, the Democratic-backed incumbent Jill Underly and the Republican-backed Brittany Kinzer. Now, here with more is UW La Crosse political science professor Anthony Chergosky, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, this is a complex three-way race for a nonpartisan office. What do you make of the results and how they shook out?
Yeah, obviously incumbents typically have a strong advantage in all types of elections, but particularly nonpartisan elections. When we're thinking about a nonpartisan election, the voters don't have a party label to work with that's listed on the ballot. And so typically if voters don't have a party label to work with, the next thing they go to is incumbent status, because incumbents have more name recognition. They've been out in the public eye, and so I was not surprised to see the incumbent advance. And then, as you noted, Will, there are certain lanes that tend to emerge in these races with multiple candidates, maybe a lane for school choice or a lane for a more conservative candidate. So it was quite interesting to see how this race turned out. It shows us how voters make decisions in nonpartisan elections. It shows us how incumbency still can matter a lot. And it shows us how there can be these different ideological or issue-based lanes that emerge to distinguish the candidates.
So the other thing happening Tuesday was we were in the midst of that cold snap. Is there any political science guidance on what happens when elections are held in the cold like that?
Yeah, weather does affect voter turnout. I think a little less so than it used to, because now so many more people are voting early. They're voting through the mail. We have seen mail voting rates drop post-pandemic, but they haven't dropped to pre-pandemic levels. So a lot of voters still do like to vote by mail. I think that's going to promote high voter turnout going into the future when voters enjoy a full complement, a full range of options to cast their ballot. But of course, with a February primary, we do expect low voter turnout. And another big reason for low voter turnout was the lack of a primary in the state Supreme Court race. That's a big difference from 2 years ago. In 2023, there were 4 candidates on the primary election ballot for the state Supreme Court. Now, with only Brad Schimel and Susan Crawford, only 2 candidates, that means that we could skip the primary election this time around. And I think that also affected voter participation.
So less so down here towards Madison, but in your neck of the woods, there was a competitive mayoral primary. Did that drive turnout at all?
Yes, voter turnout in the city of La Crosse was higher than in the surrounding municipalities that did not have local primary elections. That's the interesting thing about these primary elections and sometimes these February or April elections. Local areas really differ in terms of what's on the ballot. And so around Wisconsin, you see elevated or depressed levels of voter turnout related to what's on the ballot of that specific locality.
So we've also seen Elon Musk weigh in on that state Supreme Court race. What do you expect from that race coming up here?
Yeah. Elon Musk has added a fair bit to the pro-Brad Schimel side of the spending equation in the Wisconsin State Supreme Court race. I think it's going to have the effect of polarizing the electorate, because many on the conservative side really like Elon Musk. Many on the pro-Trump side really think what Elon Musk is doing is great with Doge and with other efforts that Musk is engaging in to reshape the federal government. Meanwhile, Elon has become a villain for Democrats and for the anti-Trump side of the equation. So I think that Elon's involvement in this election could polarize the electorate. I think it could result in more money for the Schimel side for sure, because Elon has enormous wealth and he can put a lot of money into supporting Brad Schimel. But also I think it could be a feature in fundraising for the Susan Crawford side of the campaign, trying to campaign off of the idea that Elon is trying to win the election for Schimel. And the Crawford campaign and Democrats could use that to motivate their own side and motivate their own donors. So I think the Elon involvement, the Elon factor is going to have a polarizing effect. I think it's going to motivate both sides. I think we're going to see more money coming in. And all told, Will, I think we are going to smash the spending record that we had from 2 years ago in the 2023 election. Obviously, there was an enormous amount of money spent in the race between Janet Protasiewicz and Dan Kelly. I think we're going to blow right through that record because of Musk's involvement. We're also seeing a big spend from Wisconsin Manufacturing and Commerce. Other conservative groups, some of the usual suspects on that side, have given big money. Then we've seen big money on the pro-Crawford side as well. We know that the Wisconsin Democratic Party is a fundraising juggernaut. So we're going to blow past, in my opinion, we're going to blow past the record for campaign spending that was set 2 years ago.
Professor Chergosky, thank you. Now, when we come back, UW President Jay Rothman talks about his 2-year budget plan for the universities, plus how the UWs are navigating increased scrutiny of federal funding and DEI. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back. This week, the governor delivered his biennial budget address, and later in the show, we'll break this down with the president of the Wisconsin Policy Forum, Jason Stein. But first, included in the governor's proposal is what he is calling the largest increase in funding to the state's university system in history. Joining us now to break all of that down is Universities of Wisconsin President Jay Rothman. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Great to be with you today.
I'm glad to. I did not say UW system right off the bat.
There we go. There we go.
Promising myself. In that vein, what does the Universities of Wisconsin need in this next budget here?
You know, I think, you know, we are currently on a per student basis, 43rd out of 50 in the nation in terms of public support for our universities. And we want to change that. We want to get up to the median level because I think that will allow us to be competitive and help Wisconsin win the war for talent. And I was absolutely ecstatic at Governor Evers' budget proposal, which gets us to that level. And I think it's good for the state. It's ultimately great for the citizens of the state of Wisconsin and prospective students that will be future graduates of our universities.
One of the other things we've been tracking is the impact that some of the federal funding trickling down into Wisconsin has had, both on state government but also the universities of Wisconsin here. Can you describe just kind of how the impact has been?
Well, it's still kind of going through its machinations, but there's not a lot of clarity in terms of what's going on, and I think, you know, in a lot of cases there has been a meat cleaver kind of approach to this, and I don't think that's a business-like way to approach how you reduce spending. And I think if there are opportunities to reduce spending at the federal level, you should absolutely be taking advantage of that. But simply doing it in a broad-based way that doesn't give clarity to our universities is a problem. And I'm worried about two things as it relates to our universities. One is student financial aid, which the federal government, both through student loans and grants, is important. And then secondly, research dollars, particularly important to UW-Madison, about the lack of clarity about that, where it's going, what some of the things that are now at least temporarily enjoined by courts, what will happen long term. And that has the possibility of having a really dramatic impact on our universities in a way that's not healthy. When you think about the Alzheimer's research, the cancer research, the various research that is going on not only at Madison but at other institutions as well, that helps Wisconsin, that helps our nation, it helps the world. And I think we have to be very careful about how we address that, and it should be done, in my judgment, in a more business-like fashion.
Is there enough of a buffer in the UW system where, if that federal funding lapses for a little bit, can some of that research continue, or is this truly, could wrap up within a matter of months?
I mean, I think that there is a little bit of leeway, but not a great deal. As a practical matter, changes will have to be initiated if, in fact, the funding spigot is turned off. And you think about this, these are things where there are clinical trials ongoing, there's ongoing research. You can't just turn it off and turn it on and turn it off. It doesn't work that way. It's got to be continuous. So we are concerned about it, very much so. And we are hopeful that it shakes out in a fashion that ensures that great research can continue, but time will tell.
So we've seen across the campuses enrollment uptick a little bit, especially at those four-year campuses. But we've also seen within the last couple of years some of those two-year campuses close. Do you have a sense over this next biennium, this next two-year budget, will we see more two-year campuses close at all?
Well, what I've said publicly about our budget request, which is now incorporated into the governor's budget proposal that he introduced earlier, is that two things. One is if we get that funding that gets us up to the median level on a per student basis, we will not raise tuition for the 2 years of the biennium. I will not recommend a tuition increase. And secondly, we will not move to close any branch campuses that aren't already slated for closure already. And that funding will allow us to, I think, take actions that can help those branch campuses. But, you know, we're focused on two things across the board. One is affordability, wanting to make sure we are as affordable as we can be for the citizens of Wisconsin. And then secondly, to make sure we have as broad accessibility as we possibly can have. Both of those are threatened, though, at the end of the day, if we don't get funding that at least gets us back to the average on a nationwide basis.
Speaking to transparency, right now, all of state government is going through an audit right now, looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Across statewide, certainly a big element of that will be the universities of Wisconsin. A couple years ago, too, the system had to make some concessions to lawmakers, hiring freezes, for example, to secure some funding. Are you concerned about any of that audit, what that might find, what that might entail?
You know, I think it's important as we look at DE&I in particular that when I started a little over 2.5 years ago, one of the first things I did was sit down with our chancellors and talk about what are we trying to accomplish with our diversity and inclusion efforts. What is our goal? What are we focused on? And we really came back, certainly a broad concept of diversity certainly includes race, ethnicity, but it also includes political ideology. It includes religious background. It includes disabled status. It includes veteran status. That we look at diversity with a broad lens. But then we came really two principles. One is we are focused on student success. So our students coming to our universities feel as though they're included, that they can be challenged, but they feel as though they belong there, so that they are retained, graduated, and then launched into successful careers. So it's on an individual by individual basis that you achieve that student success. And then the second is to ensure that our students coming out of our universities have a cultural fluency, that they understand that people from various parts of the world and from various backgrounds see the world differently than they might. And that's critical to have at least that perspective, because we're preparing students, A, for jobs that do not yet exist, and B, to compete in a global marketplace. And having that cultural fluency is important.
The other thing that we're seeing federally is this DOGE committee looking at reducing the size of federal government. We're seeing something analogous here in Wisconsin, looking at reducing, finding waste in Wisconsin government here. Are you kind of looking at that as a possibility of the universities might be a target of that? Might see a reduction in staff, anything like that?
I think the universities will certainly be one of the focal points. Representative Nedwiski, who chairs that committee, has said as much, and I've had some good conversations with her. And I believe in efficiency, and I think we need to step back. When I started, we had 10 of our 13 universities that were running structural deficits financially. We're down to 6. We'll eliminate those deficits by 2028 or before. So we are taking action already to ensure that we can be as efficient as we possibly can. And efficiency is not one and done. Efficiency is a process. You have to constantly review and become more and more efficient. So we welcome the review of trying to how can we be even more efficient? But we've been doing this now for the last couple of years, and our universities have had to make some really hard choices, including layoffs. And I don't take those lightly, but to align to make sure that we are as efficient as we can be, and most importantly, that we are operating within the resources that we have. But at the end of the day, coming from a business environment, I know you don't cut your way to success. You can be efficient and you can make reductions where it's appropriate, but if you think you're going to hit your bottom line and be successful by simply cutting, I think you're wrong. And that's why further investment in the universities of Wisconsin is important. Being 43rd out of 50 in the nation on a per student basis is not the Wisconsin I know, and I don't think that's an acceptable place for our state to be.
Asking you to peer into your crystal ball a little bit, if we were to check in July, for example, when this budget gets passed, what do you think will be the end result for the system?
You know, I remain very optimistic. I'm grateful for Governor Evers and his leadership. and supporting the region's request to get us up to that median level of funding for our universities. And my conversations with legislators, I think my hope is, and I know they want a strong Wisconsin, and my hope is they see that an investment in the universities of Wisconsin is an investment in the future of our state, and that the generations of universities of Wisconsin graduates and the opportunities they have will be afforded to the next generation of Wisconsinites coming up.
Well, Jay Rothman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be right back after this. Welcome back. As we were talking about before the break, the governor laid out his 2-year spending plan during a speech in the state capitol on Tuesday.
There is a lot of work to do, folks, but I know we can get good things done for Wisconsin in this budget if everyone focuses on doing what's best for our kids, delivering real solutions for real problems Wisconsinites face every day, and doing the right thing.
Now, this kicks off a months-long debate over how to fund state government and how to spend the state's budget surplus. Now, for more on this, we sat down with Jason Stein, president of the Wisconsin Policy Forum. Here's more. Anything specific that stood out from you from the governor's budget or the budget address on Tuesday that you'd want viewers at home to know?
Sure. I mean, I think the bottom line is this is a very broad, deep document with a lot of changes to taxes and a lot of changes to spending. It would substantially spend down the state's surplus. It would leave a fair amount in the state's general fund and rainy day fund. It's sort of two main sources of reserves. But you know, the next state budget from 2027 to 2029 would start out under this proposal with a substantial potential hole that would make it more difficult to balance.
So when we kind of look at these two competing plans, you have the governor providing this draft. The legislature gets to kind of, do what they will with that. The governor doesn't necessarily get to win on some of these. The legislature can peel back some of, as they have described, the policy stuck in the budget and kind of start from scratch, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at any level of government, whether it's a mayor in the city council or the president in Congress or the governor in the legislature, it's really those elected legislative bodies that have the most control over spending and taxes, and that's what a budget is. But in Wisconsin, the governor happens to have, an unusual amount of power because of his veto pen.
I want to ask I've been trying to kind of grapple around how to describe what a surplus is. This extra money either with increased revenues or decreased spending that the state has unaccounted money for. Is there a better way to describe it?
Sure. I mean, when we talk about the surplus, we can be meaning different things, but essentially, during the pandemic in particular, the state was taking in much more money from, the economy was being juiced by federal pandemic aid, and the state was taking in a lot of tax revenue and was still keeping controls on spending relatively tight. So we built up this large surplus or this large balance in our general fund that is somewhat akin to the balance in a checking account that a family would have, right? And for the last 2 years now, we've been spending down that balance, but it will still be at more than $4 billion at the end of the year. And so that's generally when people are talking about the surplus, that's what they mean, is how much do we still have left over in our state's general fund after we've done this spending each year.
And then the other kind of big question we're looking at is how what's going on in Washington impacts Wisconsin too.
Yeah.
When you talk about those federal funds, is that a significant portion of the Wisconsin budget? If some of those funds dry up or slow down at all, would that have a significant impact here?
Right. Well, it's really unclear right now because there's back and forth. There's a lot of court cases happening. There's a lot of uncertainty about what the final outcome is going to be, but the potential outcome is very big. The state's budget from all funding sources this year, 2025, is $49 billion, and the federal portion of that budget is $14 billion. So it's a very significant amount. That funding comes in for things like transportation, the UW system, various things within the UW system, Medicaid healthcare for the needy is also a big one, as well as certain other areas like unemployment, food stamps. There's a significant range of programs that receive some federal funding. Most of that funding is going to be fine. Nothing's going to happen to it. It's going to operate along the way it always has, or with some changes. But there could be impacts to that.
We'll be right back after this. Welcome back. We've been talking about the state budget throughout the show, and it's a word-heavy document. Heavy, maybe like heavy cream. I think there's something there. Anyway, stuck in the budget, the governor included a proposal to create a butter-themed license plate, as well as a blackout-style plate that has become popular among other states. Now, we don't have a mock-up of that plate yet, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on throughout the months ahead. And that does it for us this week. I'm Will Keneally. Have a great rest of your weekend.
This has been For the Record.